Dear colleagues, Mr. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend a warm welcome to the Secretary General of the Community of Democracies, our good friend and partner, Mr. Thomas Garrett, who will address the topic of building resilience of the rules-based international order and the promotion and defense of democratic values. Secretary General, thank you for kindly responding to our invitation to attend this very important event of the Romanian diplomacy. Dear colleagues, as you all know, Romania has assumed the presidency of the Community of Democracies, which is the largest global intergovernmental coalition of democratic states in 2019, 30 years after embracing democracy. This year we extended our mandate until 2022, proving our continued commitment to pursue our goals and projects aimed at consolidating and defending democracy. Given the challenges imposed to democracies around the world by the ongoing pandemic, but also by increasing threats to the very core democratic values by populist and authoritarian regimes, transborder malign influences, and flagrant disregards for human rights, our Community of Democracies, and hence Romania's mandate at the presidency of the community, became even more important and with a greater responsibility. As I said many times, while core democratic values and principles are universal, democracy is an ongoing process. The current circumstances have proven even more the fragility of some democracies, thus making the need to consolidate the resilience of democracies paramount. The Bucharest Declaration of the Community, adopted last year on the occasion of the 20th anniversary conference, encapsulates the essence of resilient democracies, and I quote, "Democratic systems of governance built on respect for human rights, strong institutional capacity, transparency and trust have the best basis to overcome crises and build back sustainably," end of quote. Romania remains of the strong view, which could even become the motto of our community, that democracies are stronger when they work together. Therefore, we find that resilient democracies is the key to promoting international rule of law and rules-based international order. It is thus our common responsibility to make sure that democracy prevails, as mentioned by President Biden. And to do that, we need to prove that democracy works and that democracies deliver. And there is no better way of doing this than consolidating democratic resilience, using the power of our example, working together, and by maximizing the role of diplomacy in promoting effective multilateralism and rules-based international order. In this regard, we are committed to promote the shared goals of our community of values, including by reacting to non-democratic policies of abusive regimes, supporting emerging democracies, as well as our friends and partners that struggle to advance on the democratic road. Therefore, Romania remains fully engaged in continuing to advance the common global efforts to consolidate resilient democracy all over the world. We plan to host the 10th Ministerial Conference of the Community of Democracies on the 22nd of September in an online format on the margins of the 76th UN General Assembly session. This landmark event for the Romanian presidency, with a correlated topic to our discussion today, namely democracy and resilience shared goals, will facilitate a valuable exchange of views on how to consolidate resilient democracies, an excellent opportunity to take stock of, renew our previous commitments, and set new ambitious goals for the future of our community. We believe this will be one of the first major events of this autumn dedicated to supporting democracy around the world, setting the ground for the awaited Global Summit for Democracy organized by the US administration. Dear colleagues, it is now my pleasure to give you more details about our distinguished guest. Mr. Garrett has wide experience in the field of politics and advocacy for more than 3 decades. He was appointed Secretary General of our community in 2017. Before that, from 1994 to 2017, he supported reformers and Democrats across the world with his work at the International Republican Institute. At the Institute, he served as Resident Program Director in Ukraine, Resident Advisor to the Mongolia's Parliament, Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa, Mr. Garrett was rewarded with Mongolia's Order of Friendship and holds a master's degree in diplomacy and international relations from Norwich University. Mr. Secretary General, dear Thomas, I take this opportunity to convey to you once more our gratitude for your support during the mandate of the Romanian presidency of our community, and to reiterate Romania's continuous engagement in further protecting and promoting the principles enshrined in the Warsaw Declaration. With these remarks, dear Secretary General, I warmly welcome you to our meeting today, and I would like to give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you, Your Excellency, Foreign Minister Orescu. Distinguished guests, members of Romania's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, good afternoon. It is indeed an honor to participate in this annual meeting of Romanian diplomacy. And again, I want to express my gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for this opportunity. For 2 decades, the community of democracies has reflected the diversity and the resilience of the world's democracies. The diversity and the inclusion of the community of democracies, I believe, is best seen in the range of its presidencies, which since the year 2000 have included the Republic of Korea, Chile, Mali, Portugal, Lithuania, Mongolia, El Salvador, the United States, and now Romania. The community of democracies is indeed fortunate to be led at this time by the presidency of Romania. This leadership, which began in 2019, which, as mentioned, was a moment that symbolically marked 30 years since your country rejoined the world family of democracies, and leadership which will continue until September 2022. Undertaking this mandate and fulfilling its duties to the highest standards have shown the Romanian presidency's strong commitment towards upholding democracy, the rule of law, and fundamental rights and freedoms, and the principles inscribed in the founding document of our community, the Warsaw Declaration. The community of democracies of which I'm a part, as Secretary General, was established in the year 2000. It was in that year that what was the largest gathering of democracies to date took place in Poland as an initiative of U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. Much as with the currently anticipated Biden Summit for Democracy, the gathering in the year 2000 was initiated by an American president as a result of a pledge during the election campaign. It was in the year 2000 that President Bill Clinton ran for office with a pledge to put official support for democracy as a component, a central component of U.S. foreign policy. I'm drawing the comparisons of President Biden's upcoming Summit for Democracy, which is now planned to occur virtually in December of this year. I'm drawing the comparison with the Clinton administration's 2000 gathering, because many of the issues of democracy, which were a question today for the Biden Summit for Democracy, were the very questions raised at that Polish gathering 21 years ago. Just a few moments of history as to what occurred at the founding of the community. In preparing for that meeting in the year 2000, many of the officials in the U.S. State Department were hesitant about a democracy summit because they were unsure which countries might be invited, and they were even more unsure which countries would not be invited. The U.S. government's treaty and international agreement lawyers were concerned that a summit-style discussion of democracy and human rights might bring new financial or legal obligations and commitments. Half of the State Department wanted to support President Clinton's agenda as long as it was not a one-off, one-time event. The other half of the State Department said they would support President Clinton's idea if it was a one-off event with no permanent legacy. As I'm sure you know, a memo to the U.S. President seeking action undergoes many stops along the bureaucracy. For that 2000 gathering, the official memo route was bypassed. Secretary Madeleine Albright herself delivered the idea in writing to President Clinton, who jotted down on the memo his approval. On the margins he wrote, "This is a good idea." And he also jotted down his support, writing, "Please go ahead." And so with President Clinton's endorsement, the conference, which was called Towards a Commitment, a Community of the Democracies, It took visible shape in 1999 with early partnership of the United States and Professor Bronislaw Goremek, Poland's foreign minister and a solidarity activist. Secretary Albright and Foreign Minister Goremek together were uniquely suited to host this gathering. Albright brought her experience, which stretched from being a refugee of authoritarianism to service as the first woman U.S. Secretary of State. Professor Goremek's own story of freedom and its fragility began with his decision to resist tyranny after the 1968 Warsaw Pact crushing of the Prague Spring. The partnership of Secretary Albright and Foreign Minister Goremek grew this conference into something more than just an American enterprise. The partnership was further expanded when a convening group of nations was assembled. Every region of the world was represented by one of its democracies. Countries received invitations to this gathering in 2000 according to the assessment of their convening group neighbor. In preparation for this 2000 conference, the State Department Policy Planning Team was tasked with gathering several international norms of democracy and human rights into a non-binding political declaration. Their starting point was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which, as you know, states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. There were new rights and principles that were inserted into this draft, things concerning independent monitoring of elections, elections that were open to multiple parties, and civilian control of the military. There was proposed language on independent media, which quickly drew the attention of treaty lawyers, who noted that the proposed language was not found in any treaty or agreement at that time. So compromises were reached, which said the press had a right to collect, to report, and to disseminate information, news, and opinions, subject only to those restrictions necessary to a democratic society, and to those restrictions prescribed by law while bearing in mind the evolving international practices in the field. Some of the other rights that were considered in the draft document included the right of those duly elected to form a government, to assume office, and to fulfill the term of office. Also included was an elected government's obligation to refrain from extra-constitutional action, to allow the holding of periodic elections and to respect their results, and to relinquish power when its legal mandate ended. One of the countries that was invited to participate noted that, again, several of the draft principles were not at the time contained within existing treaties, and they presented that as a reason to limit the document's scope. But instead, the newness of these principles of human rights and democracy became a strong motivation for proceeding with 19 principles at the 2000 gathering in Warsaw. And so while that gathering in Warsaw in the year 2000 reflected the diversity of democracy, there were parliamentary and federal systems, constitutional monarchies, countries just beginning their transition to democracy. But as their diversity was acknowledged, the belief that a certain set of principles and standards on human rights and democracy were needed led to the adoption of the Warsaw Declaration by 106 of those countries that were gathered, including Romania. Briefly, let me just mention one or two items of the Warsaw Declaration. Principle number 1 states that the will of the people is the basis and authority of government. The right of every person to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion forms principle number 5. Principle number 9 speaks to the universal right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. And there are other principles that speak to freedom from arbitrary detention, freedom from torture, equal protection of the law for minorities and disadvantaged groups, and in support of independent judiciaries. So 21 years since its adoption, the principles of the Warsaw Declaration remain in place, even though today the membership of the community of democracies has changed, reflecting in many ways the challenges that have since presented themselves over 21 years for democracy. The principles of the Warsaw Declaration have been used as a checklist by established democracies as to their performance. The Declaration is also used as a roadmap to democracy for transitioning countries. From this beginning 21 years ago, the community of democracies has gradually developed from a conference-based initiative into an intergovernmental coalition of democratic states. Today, we aim to be a multi-stakeholder platform for dialogue and a place where discussions supporting democratic values through various initiatives can take place. We seek to provide our member states with a forum to learn from each other and to identify global priorities for diplomatic action to advance and defend democracy, including through collective diplomatic effort in multilateral international fora. Distinguished guests and friends, earlier I mentioned my belief that the community of democracies is benefiting greatly from the current presidency of Romania. It was 32 years ago, after the transition back to democracy in your country, that you have since come very far. In terms of democratic standards, Romania has been willing to set an example for the region, and even for some countries that have enjoyed much more extended times of established democracy. The foreign minister alluded to this. For instance, the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated the vital role of the multilateral system and solidarity between nations in keeping such a major global threat as under control as we could. When the COVID-19 threat became a global pandemic last year, the Romanian presidency quickly adapted to the new situation and supported us as we moved our activities online. I must here repeat the foreign minister's mention of the Bucharest Declaration, adopted during last year's anniversary conference. The Bucharest Declaration represents a highlight in the timeline of our community. 20 years after the adoption of the Warsaw Declaration, the Bucharest Declaration, adopted by our governing council, was a vital form of support to the long-standing democratic principles and an appeal to the world's democracies to lead by example when fighting the pandemic. The Bucharest Declaration encouraged democracies to transform the crisis into an opportunity for reform, into an opportunity to increase participation in decision-making processes, and to promote innovation and development. I wish to especially thank Foreign Minister Orescu for his support in the community of democracies' move to online and virtual activities over the last several months. Because even if nothing compares to events with a physical presence, this period has marked for the community of democracies and its online events new windows of opportunity, providing a faster connection with a broader array of actors, including young people and civil society from faraway countries. If you would allow me just to mention a few other initiatives of the presidency's achievement, which reflect the priorities that were assumed by Romania in its mandate. We had the anniversary conference to mark 20 years since the establishment of the Community of Democracies. We had the Youth Forum take place in July 2020. We saw the virtual conference on safeguarding democracy and countering malign foreign influence. And we saw also the online conference on enabling democratic governance through technology. And last but not least, I wish to thank Romania for its support throughout the years at many levels, from the foreign minister and the dedicated team here at the MFA, as well as from the Embassy of Romania in Warsaw for support to the Permanent Secretariat of the Community of Democracies, support which has ranged from guidance, leadership, as well as to financial support and the secondment of Romanian diplomats to our office. It's my pleasure to mention that the presidency, together with the permanent mission of Romania and the Secretariat, is now preparing the 10th Ministerial of the Community of Democracies, which, as the Foreign Minister said, will take place virtually on the margins of the high-level week of the 76th UN General Assembly. Even if this was not the scenario first sought by the presidency and the permanent secretariat to do this in a virtual format, I believe that under the able leadership of Romania's presidency, we're going to be able to raise the profile of the Community of Democracies and reconfirm its role in promoting democratic principles and values at the global level. We strongly need to raise this profile, and we need to reconfirm and reaffirm democratic principles. Because today we are witnessing challenging times for democracies worldwide. This has been a period marked by violent extremism, irregular migration, asymmetric conflicts, and of course the pandemic. During all of this, authoritarian regimes and their followers have used every opportunity to question the efficiency of democracy. But I know I join with the Romanian presidency when I say I firmly believe there is no other sustainable form of governance than democracy that can create the necessary conditions for development, the respect of human rights, while ensuring peace and stability at the same time. We see this continuous global trend of significant pressure applied by various forces on democratic governance around the world, and I think that makes the activity of the community of democracies ever more relevant. The international community, democratic governments, and civil society must work together to identify our responses to address the complex and evolving transnational challenges to democracy. For instance, we see now again in 2021, once more, voices are raised asking whether democracies can respond to terrorism's threat and security-related challenges. It's our belief, and I know that we share that with the Romanian presidency, that democracy is actually the cornerstone of security. When able to consolidate and flourish, democracy is the best political system capable of achieving domestic and international peace and security. Research that we've done at the Community of Democracies has found that a country's best defense against terrorism is to improve its legitimacy through democratic practices at home and abroad. Studies have proven more than once a link between democracy and security at the international level. Democracies do not go to war against one another, and they're much less likely to spawn internal armed conflicts or to experience prolonged deadly terrorism. And of course, this is because democracies channel dissent through nonviolent means and manage violence through respect for the rule of law and human rights. It's here I want to mention the invaluable role of civil society in all aspects of democratic governance and the development. While we are witnessing the shrinking of civic space in many parts of the world, I think we have to stand united to defend civil society as an important part of the global democratic architecture. Let me just stress again that democracies with a vibrant civil society play a crucial role in fostering security and preventing violent extremism. It's therefore essential that we enhance our collaborative efforts to strengthen democratic institutions. Robust, inclusive, and accountable institutions are the cornerstone of stable democracy. At the Community of Democracies Founding Ministerial Conference in Warsaw in 2000, Kofi Annan stated, "This meeting is not just a celebration. You are here because you know that the work of democracy is never done, that too many people are still denied their human rights, while too many democracies remain imperfect and vulnerable to subversion by ruthless leaders." 21 years on, his words and legacy remain relevant. Even established democracies have proven to be vulnerable over the last few years to backsliding. But experience tells us that democracies are resilient. This resilience, which is another priority of the Romanian presidency of the Community of Democracies, gives democratic leaders a perfect moment to consolidate their actions, to look for ways to invigorate democracy and seek answers to the systemic challenges it faces. So in closing, let me just say that in today's dynamic global environment, we have to accept that democracy will always face the need for ongoing adjustment. But while the models of democracy are diverse, core democratic principles based on the rule of law and respect for human rights remains universal. The Community of Democracy member states accept that democracy will always face complex challenges and agree to resolve them. As the foreign minister said, democracies are stronger when they work together, and that's the role of the Community of Democracies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Secretary General, for your insightful contribution to the works of our reunion. And I'm looking forward to see you in New York for the online 10th Ministerial Conference. And here ends our public part of this session. We will continue shortly with our debate.